Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I guess we had a power outage, and luckily our staff are trained in these situations and knew how to get us all back online here. So we were in the middle of receiving some correspondence, and we had a vote on receiving file on that last one. We will not be sponsoring the APAC, RPAC person this time around. We need more information. Okay, so we'll move forward here with the monthly cash statement. Director Saskew, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a moment. Oh, there we go. I had to reopen my Excel sheet. So I have the monthly cash statement for June 30th, 2024. We started the month with $3.38 million and ended the month with $7.993 million. So that's an increase in cash of $4,609,033. So major sources of cash for this month were tax payments. There was nothing else of significance over $50,000 that was received that wasn't a tax payment. Major uses of cash included $150,000 for RCMP quarter one payment, so that's the May on. The school requisition payment for $479,000. Payments for $30,000, $834. That's the Northern Lights Library System. That's the town's portion of it. The library itself also has to pay the exact same amount to the Northern Lights Library System as the library board. So there's two payments that are made in the same amount. And then there were debenture repayments of $239,000, as well as general construction for the year of $230,000. So those are our summer construction progress payments that we made.
Okay. A motion to adopt what was the monthly cash statement. Councillor Curtis, questions? Go ahead, Councillor Wawa.
Just wondering, as we're heading into that September point when we always discuss, are we sort of on par with previous years for collection rates?
Yes, yeah. So I looked into that last month too, and what the major source of what was outstanding was the King, Her Majesty, or His Majesty the King, and actually they did make payment in the last month. So.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And it looks like you're up again.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is the asset retirement obligation study. So the proposal is to attain an asset retirement obligation study. Municipalities in Canada have a legal obligations to retire tangible capital assets at the end of their lives. The Public Sector Accounting Board, PSAB, has introduced a new accounting standard, PSAB 3280, Asset Retirement Obligations, which requires the town to book liabilities in their financial statements for the retirement of these assets. Typical examples of asset retirement obligations which fall under the scope of PS 3280 include closure and post-closure obligations associated with landfills, buildings with asbestos, end of lease provisions from the perspective of the leasee, decommissioning of fuel storage tanks, fire water holding tanks or septic beds, as well as sewage or wastewater treatment facilities. Due to the nature of these retirement obligations, it is necessary to hire a professional to determine the liability for each of these assets. The attached proposal from JW Infrastructure Planning Limited would provide the town with necessary information to book the liability for each of these assets. The project would be remote meetings identifying assets and then subsequent scoping and cost estimates to follow. JW Infrastructure and Planning Limited will also help with the development and updating of our tangible capital asset policy to comply with ARO requirements. The financial implications are that the budget for this project is $14,500, which will be paid through general reserves, and senior administration will be notified and will partake in the staff workshops as necessary. It is essential that any staff with information on any of the above assets would be included with this project. And the recommendation is that administration recommends council to approve the asset retirement obligation study funded through general reserves.
Okay, thank you. So I will take a motion for the recommendation first. Councillor Burry makes the motion, and we can start the conversation. I know that we have as much information that we can possibly get, and we know where this is driving, who's driving this bus. So who wants to start the conversation? Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Worship. From my perspective, because the department is going to be using this as a measure for whether or not we get full funding in the future, et cetera, whether we're really on board with the study or not, I think we have to have the study done so that we have unqualified, if I'm correct on that, unqualified budget or audits.
Okay. Anybody else?
I will.
Sure you will, Councillor. Wow, I was
So-
surprised if you didn't.
I'm still not gonna support it.
Of course you're
I can't, because I looked into it and everything I brought forward last time is exactly accurate. But I do want to state, because I did look into a whole bunch of it, and I mean, the reality is this: the Municipal Government Act does require us to go ahead and get these assessments. So that's absolutely nothing to do with any act or practice that's not correct from our local accountants. We've got great people here, and we've got great stuff done within the admin. Unfortunately, the advisory boards, being the PSAB and even some of the other boards involved with it, they get to decide what in their terms makes up being, the unqualified. And then they do sort of want to hide it under saying they're required to do this to go back. Municipalities are required to get these assessments done, but the municipal government under the province nor the federal have actually specifically directed them to be done. That is something they've decided has made up what should be part of doing this assessment. So I looked at, a lot of that. So that means like our local, accountants and whatnot that we use don't have a choice. This is a requirement on them. Fully want to understand that. There's nothing they could do. There's not choice otherwise. But, from going through, they decided what is going to be their own criteria. So sadly, if we don't push back on it, they can decide anything that can be their criteria. They can keep adding items to it. I do appreciate very much. I know that I believe your worship as well as our admin did speak with municipal affairs a little bit about it. For me, my biggest issue is I know sometimes that conversations can be had, but then, it's nice to have the thing in writing. At the time when we discussed this last, I wanted an actual letter written to the minister's office to bring this forward so that we had something coming back saying to us that in writing that this may very well affect future grant applications and whatnot, because then for me, I'd be able to say, well, I don't really agree that this went. This is my reasons why. So I'm not gonna be able to support it tonight. I would like us to consider, though, that I'm sure if it does, pass through, I understand that, but I still think a letter needs to be written, asking some additional questions, saying, this has been indicated, this is why we went, but I would like to know if they have then put forward any resources or plans for what happens with some of these liabilities that we're going to basically capture and acknowledge. Because in every other thing we do, once we have knowledge of, we have liability of. So I would still like to see some follow-up with the municipality. Other than that, I would like to thank all the information that came from admin, but that's the reason why I just cannot support.
Any other comments? Councillor Rudy?
Yeah, similar to both colleagues, I guess I'll go in between. I think it makes sense for us to ensure that we have access to all the possible pockets of funding, knowing that conditional funding, also known as grants, requires us to have a certain accounting practice. I don't like the idea of an outside party directing us that is not our direct. As a creature of the province, I don't appreciate an external body being able to direct a municipality what and how they should be reporting. So I do find that concerning and definitely worthy of a letter to the Minister of Municipal Affairs. I do think it's also problematic, while this sum is not a lot, 14,500 is only uncovering a future liability that I think is more problematic for us. So I will plug my nose and vote in favor so that we can continue to have a qualified audit statement and have access to the funds that we require. But we definitely need to follow that up with a letter, in my opinion. It is a slippery slope. We do assume liability with knowledge, and with the knowledge that I'm assuming that will be revealed, even if there is a reasonable presumption that any building built at a certain time may or may not have asbestos as part of that envelope, the fact that we might be opening ourselves to more liability is problematic, in my opinion.
Thank you. Well, this year, Municipal Affairs said they are not gonna have a problem with a qualified assessment. They are not against the asset retirement obligation to being part of the practice. They're not against that at all. This is not the first time this group has forced municipalities into different reporting on their assessment, and both levels of government have agreed after this group has made more work for municipalities. But I don't know that if we want to run for a couple of years on a qualified assessment. So I'm going to probably be in favor of this, even though, again, I don't see how this group can force this stuff down. I mean, they're telling each level of government that this is something that should be required because there's been a problem in the past with municipalities walking away from sewer treatment plants, landfills. I mean, we haven't heard a lot about it. But again, I agree wholeheartedly with what Councilor Roy was saying, but I would imagine within 2 years it'll be standard operating of what the province and the feds are going to expect. So at this time, we have for the recommendation, we have a motion for the recommendation. So there's no other comments. All those in favor on the recommendation? Opposed? So noted.
Once in a while.
Yeah. Councillor Bullock and Councillor Rawawa were opposed. Okay. Next up, Director Saskew.
Thank you, Worship. So I have here the sponsorship naming, am I on the right one? Yes. The sponsorship naming rights and advertising policy. The proposal is to approve the revised policy FIN 6001, sponsorship naming rights and advertising policy. So the current policy has been reviewed and several changes were made, including providing staff with guidelines to providing staff with the guidelines required to terminate a sponsorship, naming rights and/or advertising agreement not being upheld by the applicant, providing a naming criteria to be followed when forming an agreement that enhances the geographical, cultural, and historical provisions of the town, providing consistency through the cost approval process used by the town employees in relation to the policy, providing clarity on the process required for sponsorship, naming rights, and advertising by adding the sponsorship, naming rights, advertising procedure, and renaming the current policy to provide clarity on the extent to which the policy applies. I do have some additional info here. So this additional changes include the adding of the option of naming rights agreements for the town assets and municipal features. This will help with the potential new rec center or the naming of future parks, including wayfinding. The new policy clarifies the difference between sponsorship, advertising, and naming rights. The new policy sets the standard that all agreements for the sponsorship, advertising, and naming rights must be completed in accordance with the town's procurement policy. This removes the need to take sponsorship opportunities to council, as stated in the previous policy. There is a note there. So agreements between 7,500 or less, agreements 7,500 or less can be approved by the department manager. Agreements between 7,501 to 50,000 can be approved by a director. Agreements between $50,000 and $1 to 200,000 must go to tender to be approved by CAO. And then agreements over 200,000 must go to tender and to be approved by council. So the large ones are still coming to council, and the ones that are 50,000 and up are going to tender and having a more standardized process. Finance 6001 from 2015 stated that advertisements relating to alcohol and tobacco would be prohibited. The new version has been revised to prohibit advertisements promoting illegal or illicit behavior. Regardless, all sponsorship, naming rights, and advertising opportunities must reflect the values, mandate, and operational policies of the town, and the naming criteria has been included for town-owned assets. So those are the major changes explained going into this new policy. As noted before, senior management has reviewed this policy and provided feedback that helped ensure the policy meets the needs of the town. And there are no immediate financial implications for adopting this policy. The town of Vegreville will budget future sponsorship in accordance with council direction. And if the consensus of council is to amend the current policy with the revisions, administration will update the review date for Finance 6001, sponsorship, naming rights, and advertising policy, and continue to share the most recent version of the policy on the town website. And the recommendation is that council approve the proposed amendments to policy FIN 6001, sponsorship, naming rights, and advertising policy.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion for the recommendation. Councillor Bullock makes the motion. Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Rudick, start us up.
Thank you for proposing this updated version of the policy. Just an indication for those of us that have been around for a while that there is some maturity in the organization and some changes in the community as well. I did have a couple questions. You've suggested some thresholds here. The previous policy, if I remember correctly, although I'm not certain that we did it, was to bring the first 10 offers of sponsorship to council, and perhaps we saw a handful of them. My question would be, I appreciate that there needs to be some autonomy within departments. My concern would be is that if there's a naming of any of our existing entities and those that have already been in agreement, I believe would be below that $200,000 tender threshold. So would we still be informed? It seems like the policy would just be approved internally by department.
CAO and the director.
If we're looking at those sums of money, it is definitely something that will be brought before council.
So I guess my question would be, just because we're still fairly new at this process, even though we've had this policy in place, we haven't exercised this muscle very much. And so I just would be concerned and making sure that we understand all of the implications of receiving sponsorship and or advertising or naming rights from an individual or an entity, and have the ability to be able to reflect as elected officials as well. Because there are some very public instances where, with best intentions in other communities, not in ours, where naming rights have, sometimes gone awry. So I appreciate the suggested thresholds, allowing for autonomy within departments. I think perhaps I would feel more comfortable if I was aware if there was a rush of sponsorship opportunities, just because we haven't had a lot of them in the past.
Councillor Bullock.
So the question in the past is, how many sponsorship opportunities have we had over 50,000 previously?
0.
0, okay.
We had one.
Oh, sorry, no, that's sponsorship. We've had naming rights.
Oh, okay, sorry.
See, and that's another reason for the updated policy, is clarifying the naming rights. Definitely, when it comes to something like that, council will be informed, because it's not only the money aspect, it is the fact that we will be renaming something in the community.
But it doesn't say that in the policy, that you'd be involving us.
Oh, you would definitely know. It is something I would report back to you. That is not a decision of mine to make. That is the elected officials' decisions to make.
Okay, Councillor Barry.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with the need for doing a massage of the whole thing and changing all the naming. I'm just looking for some clarity on a few points. One, to follow up on Councillor Rudick. On 3 occasions, we have looked at naming town property, and we put it out as a contest to our residents to send in names, and then we selected down and finally got a winner. And that goes to, if we take a look at Sunrise Park, Prosperity Park, and I'm going to have to try and get the right in Foxteal. So those are all 3 competitions to name those. I'm not certain, are we going to continue to do that sort of thing at times, or?
You can, that's up to council, but that doesn't, when we do like a contest like that, or a suggestion, the public engagement piece and everything, there's no monetary value associated with this. This policy is, for example, the Wally Fadoon Arena. When their family approached, they wanted to have naming rights on the arena, and there was a monetary value attached to it. That, excuse me, that's where this policy comes into play.
So this policy is only, as the wording twice is solicit or seek out.
Yes,
So you're seeking out, so the purpose of the policy is to generate revenue.
yes,
So it's not really necessarily a naming.
no, No.
It's to generate revenue from naming or sponsorship or advertising.
yes, and so
Okay.
there'd be.
So now, what I'm looking at here as well is asset. Facilities, I understand. Land, I understand. Feature. Would that include sidewalks, walkway paths, if advertising was placed on it?
Let's say Ducks Unlimited wanted to name the walking trail through the marsh area there to the south of St. Mary's. That was something
No,
that,
I'm actually meaning more, there was a suggestion at one point in time of putting an actual advertising insert into the sidewalk and or into the walking path, particularly from the Pasanka downtown.
at this time, that's not something we're looking at anymore.
Would this allow that through the word feature?
It could, but if something like that was to be put on our structures, like embedding something in a trail, that is definitely going to be council's decision, because that's different than putting a name on the outside of a building.
I'm looking at advertising primarily.
Advertising would be for, currently what we have right now are the arena boards and space in the arena on our TVs and stuff like that. That's what we're referring to when we're looking at advertising.
So the last thing that I was looking at is because, again, it says staff will seek out or solicit.
Yes.
Is there any room here for a third party to bring ideas to staff?
If it involves a third party, that is something council has to approve.
Okay.
Okay, so far, what we've taken from the policy is certain thresholds move up with the decision-making based on the monetary amount.
Yes.
But the naming rights under $200,000 doesn't actually say that it would be council's decision in the policy.
Naming rights would be brought to council. I wouldn't, we as administration would not make that decision without the elected officials.
Okay, but it doesn't say that in the policy.
We can change that.
Go ahead, Councillor Rowland.
I think that I would like to see, not because I do want to see departments being able to make some decisions without them having to come, just the naming rights becomes one that may be a little bit trickier, or, we don't even know, like, one of the things that could come as looking in some of the naming criteria, which I actually appreciate that there's a very good list as well, but we could have a situation where it is a company, especially if we have a rec facility, could even decide to put forward a naming right of a person rather than their company themselves. So we just don't want to close ourselves off to that. So I think that would be a change that would help. My one question to it, and sorry, Megan, I normally would know exactly what this means, but when we said if it was over a certain criteria, go to tender, what do we mean necessarily by that? Do we mean it would be advertised giving others opportunity at the same, or what did we mean by tender?
Yes, so that is in accordance with our procurement policy, so that would be like a posted, either on our website, there's different criteria for where they have to be posted. And so actually after $200,000, we actually have to post it on like the Alberta Purchasing Connection different sites. So if it's looking like something is gonna be receiving value in excess of $200,000, we would actually have to post that so that people could bid on the naming rights. Or the sponsorship part of it, so.
I hardly wait till it starts happening. It's gonna be
hope so.
great.
I was gonna say, I would love for this problem to happen.
So, right now, the motion for the recommendation, if somebody made a friendly amendment that to your own motion? Okay. You would like to amend your motion on the recommendation on the following criteria, that it changes on the naming rights would be brought to council for discussion.
Would council, if I can just ask a question, would council like to see the policy with that information in there before it's voted on? Then we can just defeat the motion. Or, sorry, you can defeat the motion, and we'll bring it back for the next
Well,
council
this is
meeting.
the only amendment that we would like it, and we've never had a problem in the past that if we ask for an amendment, that it shows up. We've never seen that before.
Okay.
Sorry.
You're sorry?
I could be, sorry. I just questioning if there is an expiry on a naming of a facility, because
That
previous,
would be part of the contract.
That's part of the contract,
and so that would be outside of the policy.
yes.
So, yeah, so that part would be something that I would be interested in seeing once we get to that point too, or just hearing about what the process is. It's not the time frame. It would be for example, if it was the Justin Curtis Arena and in 5 years, if there is a process for another person who meets the criteria, is there supersedence of?
As we are going to put all naming rights in front of council, council gets to make the decision for the length, the time, and all that. So that is something that council can state their wishes when we start to negotiate contracts.
Thank you.
Councilor Barry?
Sorry, I have one question on that. Do we need to amend the policy to make sure it comes to council, or can you state that in procedure?
I would amend the policy to ensure that all potential naming rights are vetted through council.
So that would
I'd
be,
make a change to the policy itself, not the procedure.
so would that be an amendment to just one of the, like, 2.6 or something, naming rights?
We would change 2.6 to state naming rights will be vetted through council.
Go ahead, Councilor Curtis.
Thank you. You'd have to amend the procedure quite a bit, because all the state sponsorship naming rights and/or you guys have to change quite a bit in that procedure as well. Or move it
but
to a
the-
different section.
Yes, and the procedure's easier because the procedure is just our how-to and it doesn't get vetted through council. Like the actual procedure, you guys can see it afterwards. It's just the CAO that has to sign off once it's.
Okay. Are we okay with an amendment to the motion, accepting the recommendation? Is everybody okay with that? Yes. Okay, all those in favor of the amended motion? Thank you, Gary. But, we'll be looking to see that, I'll tell you right now, Director Sasker. Okay. Up next is bylaw. Utilities billing bylaw.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I won't read the whole bylaw because it is quite extensive, with 5 pages. But bylaw number 05/2024 is this of the town of Vegreville in the province of Alberta to establish billing procedures for utilities provided by the town of Vegreville. And it's whereas the Municipal Government Act provides that municipalities may pass bylaws respecting public utilities, and whereas the Municipal Council of the town of Vegreville has deemed it advisable and expedient to set out the process for charging for the provision of public utility service. Now therefore, the Municipal Council of the town of Vegreville in the province of Alberta duly assembled enacts as follows. And the bylaw is the utilities billing bylaw, and the highlights in here what is that? Okay, sorry. Sorry, the pages are two-sided. I started reading something else. The highlights in here are basically it's setting out for our utility billing that we do monthly, and the utility invoices that go out On the utility invoices are of course, your water charges, your sewer charges, your garbage collection, which in your recycling, and storm water, our North Parkway drainage, debenture payment, and we also have a infrastructure fee. And the North Parkway drainage goes specifically to pay the debenture for the north side of town, the drainage ponds that are in there. And the infrastructure fee goes specifically to the infrastructure reserve to help with maintenance and repairs to our current infrastructure. Currently, right now, only customers, residents with water service that actually get water, get a bill. So this bylaw will allow us to send a utility bill to every property in town. Anybody that has any tax roll in town will receive a bill for the flat rate charges. The flat rate, again, being the infrastructure fee, the North Parkway drainage, garbage collection, recycling, storm, sewer, and which is the other one? I don't have my folder. That's the North Parkway drainage. That's right, I should be calling it flood mitigation so people understand. But anyways, the flat fees that they pay, minus the water usage and the sewer usage, every property will now pay for. Even if there's not a building on the site, the refuge bins are being used when they are doing property cleanup and mowing the lawns. If it happens to be a parking lot, let's say, it is using the stormwater systems whenever it rains. So this will be an introduction to a flat rate utility, basically a flat rate utility to every property within the town.
Okay, thank you. So I will take a motion for the first reading. Councilor Berry makes the motion. Conversation.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with this, the changes, making it a utilities billing bylaw. I think we have to realize that every property has a street in front of it that carries services, and whether there's a building on it, or whether it's occupied, or whether it's just closed for the season while they're on holidays, the town still has many expenses involved in maintaining all of the different services. So it's not just water or sewer. So I do support this.
Go ahead, Councilor Bullock.
I as well support this bylaw. Some of the properties, they may not have buildings on them, but sometimes there is a lot of stuff parked on them and stuff, and they're still using roadways. Sidewalks still need to be repaired, and they may be in front of empty lot as well. So I've had empty lots before, so I feel it should be paying for it.
Councilor Rudy.
I too am in favor. I think our core business is the very topics that are encompassed by this utility billing bylaw. We all know that it's incredibly expensive to be able to provide the core infrastructure that make a municipality valuable into the future, as we've embarked on some pretty major projects. That's been some of our major advocacy over the last number of years, is to be able to pay for those things through funds like the Canada Community Building Fund that we talked about earlier. I had a question about what kind of impact we imagine this will have on the community in terms of do we have a scope in terms of how many current empty lots there might be experiencing this new charge, or an anticipated change in income, or the total flat rate? Do we have an idea of any of those three questions?
At this time, we haven't gathered all those numbers together. We're working on it, but until first reading is passed, we needed to know where council was standing with this, but we will get that information to you.
Well, we know it's not going to be a huge number, but I would like to apologize to the residents of Vegreville from all past councils that have let this happen. People turn their water off and go away for 6 months and don't contribute to the community, don't pull their weight. Everybody that has an empty lot has it for sale, and on the premises that someone's going to use the water and sewer, those sidewalks, the roads are going to be maintained. It has been a very unfair practice to the residents of Vegreville, the way that we have billed or not billed people just to turn their water off and go away for 6 months and not support through like everybody else is pulling their weight here. So we are only going to have one reading tonight. We're going to stay at the first reading, and we're going to let the public know that this utility bill is coming. And again, I feel terrible for all the residents when I seen the way that we do this, and other municipalities are starting to see this too. But if you own property and think that you can just turn your water off and go away for 6 months and just abandon this community and not pay your fair share for what's happening in front of your road, the sidewalks that need to be maintained, the water that's going down the storm sewer, and the infrastructure that's in the ground, because when you come home, you expect to turn it back on. So, is there any other comments regarding this new utility billing bylaw?
One.
Go ahead.
Just because I know our want has always been to try and provide everyone with basically something that is sustainable, knowing what you have, not getting a lot of surprises. That's something that's important here, because we then have no way of knowing when people might make choices to turn items on or off. And if we were in a situation where we had a large number, we actually would bring in less than we would have projected, which could impact us when it comes to the budget for what had already been put in place. So this is one of these things that is more about, predictability, sustainability, as well as making sure that everybody is contributing on a fair and equitable way. There are a lot of other practices where we've seen with other municipalities also, where an asset, whether someone chooses to use that asset or not, that is their choice, but us providing it is something we have to do regardless. So I think this falls and hits both of those things. It allows us to have a more accurate assessment of the funds we'll bring in, because we'll know them based on the property not changing and how much we bring in, as well as being able to always have that asset being looked after and paid for. So I think it's important.
Well, if it's 40 addresses in town, I'd be surprised. But the fact that as a municipality, we borrowed money for the Northway drainage system, and everybody benefits because their property's not flooding. For people to think that they shouldn't have to contribute, or for the potential sale of that lot, knowing full well that that water and sewer in front of their place works, and their sidewalks, if they go by and it's their turn, they're going to get new sidewalks by not contributing. No. We need to be fair with everybody. This is not a cash cow. This is not a cash grab. What this is about fairness to every resident in this town. And again, I apologize that we have let this go on the way we have. People not contributing to the everyday support that we need in this municipality to keep the infrastructure that we have and for the new stuff that's coming. So if there's no more comments, I will call a vote on the first reading. All those in favor? Carried. So we will have the next council meeting.
We will have second and third reading at the September 9th council meeting.
And are we going to be posting this on our own social media?
We can, if that's council's wish. At the last legislative meeting last week, we had a memo attached to the bylaw, and we went through it with council, and then this week is the bylaw. We can post, we can do a council highlight and make sure that public is aware that this is coming. And also, as discussed last week, we were looking at a 60 to 90 day rollout, so we can have an extensive public education piece after the bylaw has gotten third reading.
What are your guys' thoughts? Do you want to just wait until the next reading? I would imagine that there will be some reporting on this new bylaw that's going to be coming into effect within 90 days. Or do we just get out in front of it ourselves too and put it out there? Go ahead, Councillor Curtis.
Thank you. I have no problem getting it out there right away. I think we've been burned before by waiting and maybe not doing as good advertising as we could have, so I think it's fine to put it out there ASAP.
Because I would imagine there's going to be probably 12 people that don't live in town are going to be very upset. And there's probably going to be another 18 to 20 other people that are going to say, well, that doesn't make sense. I own property. Why would I have to pay anything to support this community? Well, let's hope the other 6,828 people will be, go ahead, Councillor Barry.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just looking at the timing. If we pass it in September, that should mean it would roll out and implement January 1st. Because we'd be giving them 90 days from that time period. So what we're basically informing the public is that it's our intention to go forward with this as of January the 1st, and that it'll be approved in September.
Okay, well, do you guys want to see it on our social medias that what we're working on is this bylaw? We've had first reading on it. Does anybody have a problem with putting it on social media? Me neither. Okay, let's get it out there. Okay, so we will wait for the second and third readings until the September meeting. Excellent. Okay, we are moving on to council reports, and we're going to start with Councillor Lemko.
Thank you, Your Worship. July 22nd, I had a virtual meeting with ASA and more updates on the Ukrainian file and what's going on. July 24th, I attended the MD Minburn Building Committee meeting, and it was also a tour of the Smoky Lake Lodge and that facility as we move forward with our ask. It's interesting to tour other facilities and see what these units are like and peel off the low-hanging fruit that would be beneficial to what we're doing with our potential build. August 7th, I was once again in the Vegreville parade, still being able to walk it. It was, again, a beautiful day, a nice parade. I was glad to be part of it. August 7th, I also attended the special meeting of council. And then on August 8th and 9th, I was fortunate enough to drive the shuttle at the fair, which is a blessing, as it's a great time to see the fair in its entirety and also to be able to communicate with lots of individuals as you're driving around. And interesting to see the amount of people that don't live in our community that travel here specifically for the fair, family from Drayton Valley. Came here because there's no fairs in Alberta to speak of. Everything's a rodeo or a stampede. So they were very happy to bring their children here. And then August 12th, I attended the MD Minburn Foundation meeting and the update from the architect and the project manager to provide information to the whole foundation board as to the status and what this future looks like. So we're excited to get this together and ready to submit here shortly our piece there. And that's tonight's council meeting, and that's my report. In between there, I went fishing to Prince Rupert. Slam those salmon, Gerald. Okay.
Thank you very much for the fishing report. Excellent. Thank you a lot for what you do. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you very much. For me, August 7th, the fair parade, walked in that as well. I think there's more attendees than the previous year, because last time we turned heading towards the arena and it was pretty sparse in a lot of it, and this year was not, we managed to keep enough candy for everybody, so nobody was throwing rocks back at us, which is good. Also on the 7th, I did the special meeting of council, and then the 9th, drove shuttle at the county fair as well, which, as Councilor Lemko said, it's awesome to talk to people from out of town and shuttle people around that may need a little bit of help, and when not, all the people that don't need help are gone, you can shuttle around a few more people than just help out, and even take a few kids over to the zipper if you have to, right? Then we had our legislative meeting on the 13th, and then the CAO meeting on the 13th, and tonight's council meeting.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rudick.
My report looks the same as everybody else's. I'll just say a big thank you to the Veg Ag Society for putting on a stellar event. 5-day-long extravaganza is a big commitment with volunteers, particularly volunteers who have been experiencing some personal loss with the loss of their president, Alan Baxendall. So it was a pretty challenging time for them, and they not only showed themselves to be great volunteers and community leaders. I spoke with somebody who was on an Edmonton transit and overheard somebody talking about what a great time that they had had in Vegreville over the weekend, that they come every year with their kids from Edmonton to come here and enjoy what Vegreville has to offer, which is great to hear. Particularly when my experience, like both Councillor Lemko and Curtis, driving the shuttle on the 10th of August, most of the people I was driving around were not from Vegreville or hadn't been here for over 60 years, so it's great to be able to welcome people back here. And that is my report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Warba.
Well, I think I'll follow Councillor Rudick in the fact that I had the same events as everyone else. And I did do some shuttling as well on the 7th and the 8th. Just had two little items to bring from there. We had a conversation, so I think it's important, the work that's being done and the ongoing conversations with our RCMP. Councillor Lemko and I had an opportunity to speak with some RCMP at attendance at the event. There, as you saw, there's lots walking around, and I think one of the things we're going to need to continue to have the conversations with them, as well as looking at the planning. I think it would be interesting to find out when they assigned officers to come to the fair days, whether that is upon request from the Ag Society, or whether it is just, based upon the number of people in town. And the reason I bring that forward is in the evening that I was there, and the three officers that were there indicated that they weren't from our community. So that meant, so as we know, that they would have been called in and we would have had overtime with those officers. And the Ag Society does a wonderful job of making sure their security was in place. So I did kind of wonder about that a little bit, because there were a number of security officers walking around. So I was interested to kind of find out maybe if we can in the future as to whether that's assigned and expected, or why we maybe necessarily needed to have 3 when security seemed on site. And then the only other thing I wanted to bring forward is maybe it happens every year this year, like this, but it just seemed that this year we had a lot of local young people getting married. And so I guess what I wanted to say about that was it's kind of exciting to see the number of them that are considering coming back to the community or have already come back. So I think that's a very positive sign, and congratulations obviously to everybody who was getting married in the area, but it just seemed for some reason this year that I've noticed a lot of our young people choosing to settle back home here in Vegreville. So I think that's a good sign, and other than that, my meetings are the same.
Thank you. Councillor Bullock.
Thank you, Mayor. Back on August 7th, a special meeting of council attended. On August 10th and 11th as well was at the country fair, shuttling people around, which was really interesting. Some really interesting characters and a few more interesting ones coming out of the beer synergy center there. So it's pretty good though. Everyone was in a good mood there, so it was fun to see and fun to be there. August 13th, Legislative Committee meeting. 13th also CEO Council Quarterly meeting, and tonight's council meeting. That's a wrap.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, most of everything I was doing is about the same thing as well. On July the 31st, though, attended our first session of a rural care strategy interview, and this is mainly Covenant Health with some consultants taking a look province-wide, basically, at Covenant Health and Health Services, and wanting to look more at concerns from a rural perspective. And we had some internet problems on that day, so we couldn't achieve what we're looking at. So we have another one scheduled for the end of this month, and we're going to be looking at a series of questions that they're going to prompt us with ahead of time so that we can think a little more clearly as they look at how rural health care differs from urban and some of the needs that really need to be addressed in order to bring better care to the rural. So I think it'll be a good session. Tara Cusio, myself, and Lindsay, the administrator of the hospital, will be sitting. We're going to go and sit together this time with just one connection, and I think that it should be quite productive. On the 7th of August, I was also managed to make it from start to finish on the parade, and I have to say that the parade moved a little bit slower so that I could travel a little bit easier. But it was a really good turnout, and yes, the second half had just about as many people as the first half, so I think there was a pretty good crowd out there, and a lot of youngsters. And then the special meeting of council, Ledge, and tonight's meetings. But I also, while I was at the Ag Fair, I volunteered for 3 days, 3 long days actually, at Synergy. Met an awful lot of people there that had returned to town, that were from out of town or had moved away. But there was one young fellow that struck me the most, because he was from an area of Vancouver, and this is his first time out through Alberta and in a smaller community, and he couldn't believe how peaceful it was, and he was really, really seriously deciding about picking up and moving and coming here. Says he just, he felt this was so much different than Vancouver.
Little bit.
So, yeah, there's a lot of different people there. And then in between some of this other stuff, I've been volunteering, doing some other work around, including the corn maze. That's it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. So again, on August the 7th, I was in the parade with everybody else. Since then, I've done a few more parades, driving the truck for Crossroads Economic Development Alliance. I've been to Minburn. I've been to, where else have I been to? Ranfurly, Innisfree, yeah. And quite a big showing, and it's nice to hear people holler, "What the hell's the mayor of Vegreville doing here?" Throwing candy at you. Anyway, it was quite a parade season for me. I also attended the special meeting. I drove one night and one day at the fair and the shuttle. Nighttime is so much better. The daytime, it's not busy and kind of, but it's nice to engage in conversation with everybody, and I might have talked to Councillor Barry once maybe 3 times. And I did go back and talk to the Chuck Wagon guys, which we always do, and have a good time with those fellows. So all their teams, and there was there was more lady drivers than I've seen in a long time, and they were moving up in the ranks, so it was good. Ledge meeting, CAO council meeting after the Ledge, and on Friday, Dale and Jameson and myself sat down with the company that's made an offer to purchase on the site that we're looking at the subdivision, and we'll be meeting again and just trying to get to the point where we can meet all the conditions from what we're asking, from what they can ask, what they're asking of us as well. So hopefully we can get this deal done. And I've had quite a few other conversations with some local residents regarding what's going to happen at our park, and is it a good time to build rental properties and stuff like that. And I'm trying to encourage people as much as I can, because I think the rental vacancy rate in town has got to be touching 0 right now. So we can move fast. Dale's department, Director LaFave's department, if you want to put up some rental units in this community, their department's the ones that see, so. Okay, that's what I've been up to. Again, I would like to encourage the residents of Vegreville, anything they hear about vandalizing, any vandalism in town, to please report it to the town, or to the RCMP. And we're really upset with some of the stuff that's happened in the last few months around our community, with a lot of assets that service clubs have built and turned over to the town, and they're just getting vandalized for no apparent reason. So, with that said, is there any other business of council? Seeing none, I adjourn this meeting at 8:35.